follow traffic, clear visual approach, runway 4 right, maintain 17, John Austin, 5 mile final. 17 till 5 out.
A conversation for pilots considering the move to business aviation after flying for a commercial airline. From the National Business Aviation Association, this is Flight Plan. I'm Rob Finfrock. Business aviation can be a welcome and even lucrative option for pilots who want to keep flying after they retire from the commercial airlines or if they're just looking for a change. But there are caveats and potential gotchas those pilots need to consider, as Aviation Personnel International CEO Cheryl Barden tells us.
I think what we're looking at today is what is the motivator to transition from a contracted 121 organization into business aviation. And I would really encourage those pilots who are truly thinking about it to know what their motivator is and what would excite them about being in an operation.
Some commercial airline pilots move directly into flying for an individual or a smaller flight operation. Dylan Miller is a department manager for a small Part 91 operator.
I fortunately had a great network of folks that were working in business aviation and had stayed in touch with people that were in the industry that helped kind of prepare me for what it would be like to get into a Part 91 job. The high touch point, the customer service aspects are so different than the 121 operation. Part 121, it's a very granular knowledge of the airplane, and your job is to fly the airplane from point A to point B in the way that the company wants you to do it. And flying is probably 80 to 90% of your job. Whereas in business aviation, especially in Part 91, it felt like the flying was about maybe 20% of your job, and 80% of the job was a lot more of the customer service, the planning, the logistics, and a lot more things like that.
Another possible route is to fly for a Part 135 operation. That's the path Keith Walsinger took after retiring from his airline.
I've been flying for about 50 years, and my goal had always been to be in 121. And going from 121 to 135 was, for me, the best transition because, as Dylan mentioned, the customer perspective, the touch point, I'm not only in charge of just flying the airplane from point A to point B, but I'm also the ticket agent, the baggage handler, the fueler, the dispatcher, the weight and balance person. So we have more responsibility from top to bottom to make sure that we have a greater impact on the success of the operation, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Airlines call it retirement. I call it graduating.
How challenging was it for you to make the move to business aviation, Keith?
I had spent about the 2 years prior to retirement scoping out and networking in business aviation, both 91 and 135. And I found it very difficult to get any traction in that regard. So I was very fortunate with the operator I'm with today that I had an acquaintance there that took several months and introduced me to the management and the operators and laid the groundwork with them on my background and experience and my interest level.
You're now with a Southern California-based 135 operator. Any difficulties in finding training on the citation you fly now?
I did have to wait about 3 to 4 weeks from the time I signed on until I had a training slot. In my case, I went through 2 type rating courses in a 3-week period, and then I transitioned to flying the aircraft from the right seat to learn company procedures and operational considerations in preparation for checking out as captain. So from the time I finished the formal training, it took about 5 weeks to go through the operating experience portion, both in the right seat and the left seat, to finally get a PIC sign-off.
How about compensation?
I have retirement coming in from the airline, so compensation wasn't top of mind in my transition to business aviation. In my case, I'm flying around 8 to 10 days a month at a daily rate, and my compensation is good. I have benefits, insurance, things like that are supplementing my Medicare. So I'm in a very good position, both compensation and benefits-wise. So I'm very happy. If you have an open mind, if you like flying airplanes, if you're enjoying it, and the compensation is not the number one driver for your entry into corporate flying, you're going to have a fun and successful career, and people are going to enjoy flying with you.
Indeed. Dylan, how closely does that match up with your experiences?
There are some big differences that airline pilots will need to understand when it comes to training, right? As Keith mentioned, the footprint of training for an aircraft is significantly shorter in business aviation at the airlines. So at the airlines, you may be in a course for 6, 7, maybe even 8 weeks to learn the 737 or the Embraer. It's going to be less than half that when you're in business aviation. And then there may be less structure when it comes to the company SOPs in the simulator. So those were some of the surprises that I encountered. The good news is the foundation that you build in 121 for SOPs, CRM, and a lot of that transfers over really well. And you'll stand out in business aviation because you have that strong foundation.
How about when it comes to compensation?
You know, in the airlines, you're so used to being able to go and check the contracts that all the airlines have, and you can say, oh, this is the hourly rate I'm going to make at this hour, at this year. Business aviation, for a long time, was much less obvious what the pay rate would be. Now, there's been a lot of advances in recent years. MBAA has done a huge job in providing more clarity with their salary surveys, Air Comp Calculator. There's a lot of different resources that are now available that are getting folks out of their silo so that they can kind of see industry benchmarks. So there are tools available, but at the end of the day, a lot of it's going to come down to salary negotiation. And if you're an airline pilot, you probably have never done that in your career. So that's something that you're going to have to think about a little bit when you sit down. The number that you're offered may not be the maximum that you can earn. And as Keith mentioned, also there is flexibility for folks. Some folks are paid salary. Some people are paid on a day rate. So a lot of homework is required.
The points you and Keith mentioned also go to how the culture of business aviation is different. Cheryl, what guidance do you give pilots coming from the airlines on making that adjustment?
I would encourage them to do as much as they possibly can to reach out to pilots who, A, perhaps have made that transition before, or B, are just in business aviation and learn what it's like in the day of a 91 pilot, and truly be able to understand it, articulate it, and make sure that it motivates them. Because if it doesn't motivate them, they will never be successful. If they're looking for a set schedule, they are never going to be successful in business aviation. It's that high-touch, performance-based environment, and to thrive in a performance-based environment is what it really takes to be able to thrive in a 91 or a 135 environment.
There is certainly a lot more to the 135 workload, but in a way it's refreshing because in the 121, you're locked away in the flight deck and you don't have too much interaction with the customers other than maybe to greet them or say goodbye at the end of the journey. In the 135, it's a top to bottom experience. You greet them when they get to the airplane or get to the FBO. You make sure their baggage is loaded correctly. All this in addition to the flying part, the fueling, dispatching, flight planning, weight and balance. In the 121 world, all of this is compartmentalized. So you're not really permitted even to have these extra conversations. If you want to change something in the flight plan, you have to call dispatch. You want to change something with the weight and balance, you have to call the weight and balance department. You want to change the fueling, you have to call the dispatch. So here we have more autonomy to do what's required in order to get the flight going and get the passengers to their destination in a timely manner.
One of the things that I cherish the most about business aviation operations is that I am working with folks that want to be there enjoy being there. And honestly, a big part of that, especially if you're flying Part 91, is you're not flying 800 hours a year. Maybe you're only flying 200 or 300 hours a year. And that's part of it. It's like, I'm not punching a clock 4 days a week. Maybe it's every other week, or maybe just flying 1 or 2 days a week. And I think that's a big change in the culture. And you'll find that most people in business aviation want to be there, are enjoying it. And some folks can really find pleasure and fulfillment in completing the mission and making your passengers happy.
Dylan, what steps would you recommend for airline pilots moving to business aviation to avoid any pitfalls?
The easiest transition from 121 is going to be to a big 135 carrier or a fractional carrier, talking NetJets, FlexJets, things like that. That's going to be the easiest transition. They have all the SOPs, they have the schedule. They're going to operate the most similar to an airline. And honestly, it might be, instead of 90% of your job flying, it might be 70% of your jobs flying. So that's kind of the easiest transition, one of those bigger operators. A different option from that is going to be your 135 operator, where maybe it's an owner-owned airplane and you do some charter, some Part 91. Not as much responsibility on you there, because there's often a charter operator management company in place. So they're going to take care of a lot of the logistics. You're going to provide some customer service, but it's all not resting on you. Then you may go work for a Part 91 company that's with a managed airplane. Still, you're going to have some support there. And then kind of the most pure form of business aviation, in my opinion, is the self-managed Part 91 airplane, where basically it's all on you as the pilot, as the chief pilot or the director of aviation. Understanding those different dynamics is huge, because you can start to think about what's going to be your best fit and then plug yourself directly in.
How can airline pilots learn more about our segment of the industry before taking that leap?
One of them that I'm going to mention that an airline pilot never thinks about, but us in business aviation are all over, is LinkedIn. Go on there, create your profile, and start to follow key folks like Cheryl, who posts pearls of wisdom about the industry all of the time. And that's a great place to start learning. And then, let me search for corporate pilots in the city that I live in. And then you can start to find those folks. Let me take you out to lunch. Teach me a little bit about what you do. That's just a quick and easy way to start networking.
Keith, what was something that surprised you in your search for a role in business aviation?
I've found a stigma in regards to airline pilots, thinking that, airline pilots, they're unionized. They only want to work so much. They want to get paid a lot of money. And so there are some negatives to that. But the reality is that in the airlines, things are changing constantly. There's revisions to the airplane flight manual, revisions to company procedures. There's mergers. Every time I went through 4 mergers in my career, and every time there's a merger, some of the procedures change. If you're pliable, you can roll with the changes that come your way. You'll have a successful business aviation career.
Cheryl, continuing the point Keith mentioned, what are business aviation operators looking for when they're considering hiring a pilot coming out of the airlines?
In the work that our company does and the clients that we have, many of them would be much more interested in someone who has experienced business aviation, has left and has realized that that lifestyle, that culture, that is not for them, and that they want to come back to business aviation. I think anybody who is, as Keith was talking about, seeing that graduation ahead of them, the more they can do to get into business aviation earlier, get to an organization that is going to help get them a type rating and in a business aircraft, get their feet wet in business aviation, whether that's Part 135 or Part 91, and perhaps be on a dual track for a period of time, so that then they can expand into the business aviation operation when they cease flying in a 121 versus ceasing flying and then trying to start over again in 91 or 135. And also, I would just love to jump on one of the things that Keith and Dylan was talking about with LinkedIn. How do you network? One of the best places to network when you are trying to make that transition is with any of your NBAA regional groups. So the regional groups are a place to really stick your toe in the water, get some experience, go to a NBAA regional conference, and start to build a network and look for opportunities in your local area, because that's where business aviators are going to be hanging out. Their meetings, their happy hours, their golf tournaments, their Girls in Aviation Day, whatever it is locally, in being able to start to network into the organizations that possibly could be hiring and training you. That's the biggest thing, is getting that training in a business jet.
If you're looking for a future opportunity in business aviation, whether as a pilot or in any one of several possible careers in our industry, be sure to visit nbaa.org/jobs for more information. And that's the latest from the National Business Aviation Association. Remember, you can subscribe to Flight Plan wherever you find your favorite podcasts or by asking your virtual assistant or connected device. You can also download episodes directly from nbaa.org. I'm Rob Finfrock. Thanks for listening, and join us next time for a new episode of Flight Plan.
Right base, sending out 3500.
We got him inside. We're still on 170 coming.